Welcome to Tips for Writing Diversity Statements. My name is Kay Gruder. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm Assistant Director of Graduate Student and Postdoc Career Programs and Services at UConn's Center for Career Development at the Storrs campus. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple of items so you can know how to participate in this webinar. You should see your attendee interface on your computer desktop. Typically, it's up in the left-hand corner, and you'll be able to have the opportunity to submit questions by typing those into the chat pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and since this is a previously recorded webinar, these questions will be emailed to me and answered within typically 3 to 5 business days. Note that a recording of today's webinar will be emailed to you within 24 hours. There's also a short evaluation that will appear at the end of the webinar for you to complete, and it's helpful for me to know if you've learned something and found this topic of value. In this webinar, we will cover content that provides an overview of some of the major aspects of writing a diversity statement, and also content about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The webinar is tailored to doctoral candidates and postdocs seeking faculty positions. I'll share an overview about diversity statement content development. You'll gain some tips into understanding your audience, and I've provided some ideas for developing your content in various aspects of your teaching, research, and service. And I've also shared some resources. Let's get started with a little background information about what is a diversity statement. Basically, it's a document that features the ways that you contribute to and advance diversity, access, equity, and inclusion through your research, scholarship, teaching, and/or work and service. It can also include the ways you intend to advance diversity, access, equity, and inclusion in your future workplace. The term diversity statement can be confusing because it makes it seem like you'll only be writing one statement, but you will more likely find yourself writing content about diversity, equity, and inclusion that you can use in different ways. And I'll show you what I mean by this in a little bit. It's really important to look at academic job postings to begin to see what diversity statement content is being requested. Sometimes a job posting will simply request a diversity statement, and this often means a one-page document, but it's also pretty common to see employers asking for different types and even length of content. And it's also common to see diversity, equity, and inclusion content being asked for in cover letters and woven into research and teaching statements. It's really best to enter this process of writing your statement knowing that the objective is not really to write one document, but rather develop a range of content. So let's look at some examples of how employers are requesting diversity statements and diversity, equity, and inclusion content. So here we have UCal Fullerton, and you'll see down where it's highlighted. They're seeking a brief statement about your experiences in teaching or working with a diverse student population. So they're using terminology like called diverse student population. Here's another job application or job posting. And this is at Kalamazoo College, and it says they would like a statement on experience working with underrepresented students and engaging issues of diversity and inclusion in the curriculum and pedagogical approaches. So here's a different request. And then in this one, it's an assistant professor position at the University of Washington. And they're asking for a statement of commitment to diversity and equity of no more than 500 words. So how do these job postings inform how you prepare? Well, I mean, you absolutely need to do research. And the kind of research that you need to do is really to look at an institution's website to which you're applying, look at the department's website. There's often an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the institution. Look at campus institutes or cultural centers and learn what they are doing. You can sometimes find key information in the institution's mission. Sometimes there's a strategic plan. There might be some information in the news about what's been going on at the institution with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then you can also find data on student population. This is sometimes in an at a glance section of the institution's website or in the admissions area. And then as you prepare, you want to create content that's easily modified to meet the different word and page counts. So you will see requests for a diversity statement as in a single page document, but you also will find a lot of different variations on that theme. And then think within the framework of a narrative. So this is not an academic paper or publication. Really think about it in terms of more of a personal narrative of how you contribute to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And think about, what do those terms mean from your perspectives, and how do they matter in your life and in your work, and thinking about like what is their overall importance to higher education and also student success. All right, now let's take a quick look at a couple of different institutions' websites to see how to find information that can help you to tailor your diversity statement content. And it will help you to basically tailor that content to institutional priorities and initiatives. So we see here at the University of Washington, they have a diversity blueprint, and it's looks like it's a framework for guiding the university toward achieving its goals for diversity and inclusion. And you can also see that there's a race and equity initiative. You can see that there are resources for future students, current students, and faculty and staff. So by reading through this content, that could really inform what you choose to feature and focus on in your content. And this is from UCLA, and they have a guide on collecting information about contributions to teaching, scholarship, and service that promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this is both for faculty searches, and it's also for internal promotions at the institution. And next, I'm going to show you an evaluation grid. This is a sample evaluation grid for how one university evaluates the diversity statement content that's submitted by applicants. And many universities are also requiring these statements as part of the tenure process. So it's not just about submitting this content when you apply to positions, but it may also be asked of you once you're hired by the institution and moving through the tenure process. There are lots of different definitions for diversity, equity, and inclusion. In this slide, I'm sharing how one university, and this is the University of Michigan, defines these terms. And I would say it's really important for you to do your own research about the definitions as part of your preparation and the writing of your content. So you'll be able to refer back to this slide when you receive the recorded version of the webinar. Ultimately, the content you develop is a way for you to share your understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education, in your teaching, in your research, and perhaps in your life experiences. You'll want to feature, this is really important, through examples, how you have engaged with diversity and inclusion and the impact on you and or others. And you'll want to identify tangible ways that you can contribute to diversity and inclusion at the specific institution. So again, that's why it's really important to do some of that research in your preparation. In these next 3 slides, I'm offering a few content ideas for ways to write about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And perhaps you've been engaged in diversity, equity, inclusion as part of your research, your teaching, or your professional and public service. And so I just have some content ideas to help maybe generate some examples and to stimulate your thinking about how best to feature your engagement with diversity and equity and inclusion. So let's begin with research here. All right, so a few content ideas relevant to research. Maybe your research is about understanding barriers facing individuals and groups. Maybe you study socio-cultural issues. Maybe your research engages in the advancement of underrepresented minorities. Maybe your research evaluates programs to enhance engagement by individuals and groups or solves problems related to accessibility to resources, services, government, education, etc. Maybe your research is about understanding and combating injustices. Or maybe it involves collaboration with diverse groups or colleagues. So just a few content ideas. Let's move on to teaching. Do you have experience teaching diverse students? If you do, you could write about that. Or perhaps you're addressing different learning styles in your teaching and classroom. Maybe you're engaging in the advancement of underrepresented minorities. Maybe you're integrating content about injustices and working toward positive actions. Maybe you include texts written by oppressed, underrepresented, or marginalized individuals. Maybe you're addressing implicit bias and privilege in the classroom and the way that you approach class discussions and conversations. And, how are you creating an inclusive environment? So here are a few content ideas about teaching. Let's move on to professional and public service. Maybe you've had involvement in training that addresses the concerns of groups historically underrepresented in higher education. Maybe you've been involved in mentoring or tutoring to support underrepresented individuals and groups in the pursuit of higher education and success. Maybe you've been doing some advocacy or ally work in and beyond the institution. Maybe you've been an advisor to student programs like Women in Science or Black Engineers. And perhaps you've been sharing your research with the wider community to inform change and prompt interaction. So reflect on some of the ideas shared. And as a way to make sure that you're incorporating examples, you might want to use this framework to shape those examples. And you might want to map out an overview of a situation or a scenario and including some of the details like who, where, and what. And then identify the inequities and challenges that were evident in that situation or scenario, and share your participation, your contribution, your growth. You can also identify resources in which you engaged or those that you utilized, and then add your plans to contribute at the institution to which you're applying. Lastly, I've included a few resources to guide and support you in writing your diversity statement content. You might find that there are faculty in your department or an advisor who could be instrumental in helping you think about the content that you want to share. The Writing Center, Center for Career Development, and the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning are all great resources right here at the University of Connecticut. And then I've shared some links to some other supportive resources. Also, please know that the Center for Career Development has career coaches who are available to review drafts of all your academic job application documents. This wraps up tips for writing diversity statements. And as a final note, a brief evaluation will pop up at the end of the webinar, and you will be emailed a recording in the next 24 hours. All the best as you continue with your career preparation.